welcome back to the Election Center of Kivumbi 2022. My name is Eric Latif. This evening, we're having a conversation with Kamodwa Iganjo, advocate. We are talking about what happened today at the IEBC and at Serena Hotel, where 4 commissioners addressed the media, just a brief address, and they said, we are going to give you details later, but just know that we do disassociate ourselves with everything else that's happening at Bomas. At that point, what was happening at Bomas was the chair of the Electoral Commission was about to declare the result of the presidential election. So that means that they are not part of this. Is there any consequence to this? Do all the commissioners have a role to play in the management of the presidential election?
Let me put it this way. There appears to be some role in terms of the overall management of the election by the commission. But when it comes to, and that's why I said, if you look at the way the flow of, I believe it's Regulation 87, I think it is, I could be wrong. Yeah? The flow of that process is that we have elections at constituency level for wards, members of the county assembly, members of parliament, and there is a returning officer there. So even though the role of elections generally is given to the commission delegates to responsible officers. Yeah? And those responsible officers are provided for. The commission will appoint the returning officers at constituency and county. Those people make final declarations. At the national level, that responsibility by law is given to the chair. So in a sense, that the failure to have a consensus position, what it does is that it politically taints, in the eyes of people, it can look like this election has a problem. But in terms of the law, as it's my own reading of the law, and I have read not just Regulation 87, but also the decision by, in Maina Kiai's case, about the role of the commission vis-a-vis the role of the chair. The issue then was that the regulations seemed to indicate that the chair can adjust the results. And what Kiai was saying, what the Kiai decision was saying, says, no. The role of the commission, the role of the chair at that point is purely to affirm the results that they have. So that role was then given by the regulations to the chair solely. So even if the commissioners don't agree, that has no effect in law. Now, obviously, this is an issue that is going to be, I'm sure it's one of the issues that will be going to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court may take a different position. But then the interpretation of the law should never go to the point of absurdity. Because, to emphasize that the decision being made by the commission at this level is not a discretionary decision of the commission, where you vote and if 4 of you decide no, then the decision dies. This is a decision. It's actually, you're playing a titular role, it's just a formality. But somebody needs to declare. All you're doing is taking a result that's already come from you, and so you cannot vote.
Verifying it. It's
not about a vote. The only thing you can disagree on is whether that verification is correct. But that verification can only be wrong if the questions of the Form 34As are disputed. If the Form 34As are accepted, and don't forget that the commission had already verified those. They had finished the verification of Form 34As, save for a few of them. So if that had been finished, there's actually nothing else that you're doing, because the 34Bs, which can be amended, and I keep saying this, they're purely mathematical. So I'm not sure what the issue would be, whether the opacity would be about counting. But having said that, the responsibility to make that decision is the chair.
So now, it's solely the chair.
It's solely the chair.
So even when we were seeing the other commissioners coming out to read what has been verified, they were just...
It's by way of delegation.
It was just formality.
It's by way of delegation by the chair.
Just to show that there's teamwork here.
So there's a teamwork. And remember that because it's a political process, the election is just a legal process. That's why I don't want to overemphasize the law. It's a political process. So there's a sense in which you also need political acceptance of the result. Political acceptance is important. But the political acceptance also should only be prejudiced if the legal substructure has itself been affected. If the legal substructure is strong, then it doesn't matter. The political contamination doesn't have the same effect. The nature of our Kenyan election is that it's very rare that you find people accepting they lost. So there'll always be a political challenge to almost every election. The question is, if that election is then subjected to a review by a responsible institution. Does it pass muster? If it does, then of course the politics will come along in due time. So I think for me the question is how the Supreme Court handles this.
Yeah.
I think it's important that it responds to all these issues. It's important that, again, for the new issues that are rising, which we would never have anticipated, that they then make a decision about it. Because let me ask you, Eric, what happens if next time a chairman of a commission refuses to read the results? You know, we've never anticipated something like that.
Yeah.
What if today it was the chair? Suppose even the chair had sat in plenary, the commission had sat in plenary, agreed on a majority position, which the chair doesn't agree. Can the chair read a different result or refuse to read? You know, we've never anticipated.
We've never really gotten to this point.
Yeah, because,
right?
and a lot of these issues will keep arising as new circumstances emerge. And we'll have to keep responding to our immediate questions. Nobody would ever have foreseen this. Nobody would have foreseen a situation where today the intention was to stop the chair from reading. I give an example another time was here when I said in a county which I was, the returning officer announced the results publicly. It was even recorded by people on their phones and then disappeared with the forms.
But this is after announcing the result.
Announcing. But you see, without that physical result, because it's a constituency level, the county results, which are the final results, cannot be announced. So we stayed for 24 hours waiting
for the physical
result. Even though we all know the results. Yeah. Even though we all know the results, we have the recording of the results being read.
Yeah.
We have our own forms. But the way the law is organized, it assumes that certain things will happen. That if these forms tally, the chairman will read. But it doesn't. So what if the chairman refuses? So there are certain things that the court will have to determine to actually start to close what are going to be increasing areas of prejudice that can cause a national crisis on an election.
You've said the bigger impact of what has happened today is on the politics of it.
It's political.
So it sort of creates a different impression about the entire process. And we saw this as well in 2017.
Yes.
In 2017, one commissioner, Dr. Rosalina Kombe, took off.
Yes.
Then soon after, the other commissioners resigned, and starting with the vice chair.
Yes.
Again, this time, starting with the vice chair, 4 newly appointed commissioners come and distance themselves from this. Where is the issue, though? Why does the chair of the commission have to deal with... This is the same Wafula Chebukati who is getting the second row of commissioners leaving him.
Let me say a few things. And because I'm not an insider in the commission, I do not want to pretend to understand. But managing a team like that calls for special skills in leadership. I watched it when we were in the CIC for 5 years. We were a very diverse commission with very strong political issues, political differences, and different views on issues. But we managed to stick together. Maybe because we are not declaring an election, so maybe we could afford to. But I think this calls for very, very special skills. And maybe the chair is so busy with the election that there are certain areas there which could have been done better because you needed to have a team together. But I understand also why it is also difficult to put this team together. Because this team is appointed politically. So people have political alliances. So they have people they answer to politically. These decisions have huge implications. You know, the loss of the presidency in the third world, for many people, it is the end of a life.
Yep.
You know, so you can understand that they are very heavy investments. People have spent billions. So in a sense, the decision of one person, especially if you know that you are there as a delegate of somebody, of some entity, you can understand where that happens. So I'm not surprised. I think what shocked me is that the issues that were raised, because even then you need to have substantive differences. You see, what you don't want is that commissioners gang together and they make decisions based on alliances as opposed to the substantive issues.
Yep.
That is why I keep repeating that I have no problem. I don't think there's any responsibility for the commission to be a choir that agrees on everything. But if there are differences, especially on a fundamental issue like this, which is based on the law. You see, an election is not about what I believe and what I think and I don't like. It is whether there's been compliance with the law. So if as a commissioner I have a problem with that result, I need to be able to say, this is the violation that I'm complaining about. This is the lack of compliance. That is what I need to say. Now, maybe they will say so tomorrow. But in my mind, because of where the election today was, it would have been more useful for this conversation. You know, because then that have been responded to. You see, it would have been possible then, during the announcement, for the chairman to be able to say, I know what my commissioners have said in relation to Form 34A, but the truth of the position is the following. Then Kenyans don't go there making their own suppositions. So I'm just saying that the political impact of it is unfortunate because it is not informed by a challenge to the legality, which is what you'd have wanted to see.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's assume that the Azimio team then proceeds to the Supreme Court.
Yes.
Okay. If you were just to hazard a guess
Yes.
in the number of issues that they would raise in the Supreme Court, what would they be?
Obviously, they will raise the question. This issue about quorum is going to be raised, and whether the decision about the election, because the Constitution seems to indicate some role for the Commission, but the Act reduces that role, and the regulations is even more specific now, because now it goes to the specific roles, whereas the Constitution gives a broad responsibility of the Commission. And that is the way the law is. It will say the Commission will oversee elections, but it recognizes that the Commission won't go to my county, my location in Kiru, and sit there overseeing, you know. So the regulations and the law then do that. But that question about the role is going to be one of the issues that are going to be raised. And the question of what would then appear to be a lack of quorum. So the validity of today's... Yes, yeah. The question of the issues they have raised, because remember they talked about hacking of the system and all that, and whether that hacking then had the effect on the result. Because remember, at the end of the day, the general principle that the courts have followed is that it is not enough to show that there was a problem. It is not enough to say the system was hacked and there were people who were penetrating the system. There were people who came into the room when the commissioners were meeting. You need to say, yes, that's all very true, and that is wrong, and it shouldn't have happened, but did it affect the result? So they will then need to show, and maybe they have the evidence, I wouldn't doubt they do, that the system was hacked. And when it was hacked, Form 34A was changed, and this is the original 34A. And that 34A had better be one that everybody has, not just one that you yourself have. And I think that is going to be a heavy threshold to meet. I don't know. I think we would have to wait and see. I think the other issues that may arise, I don't know. If it was the other side that was petitioning, I can tell you that I've raised the question of the involvement of government and public officers in the campaign. I am sure that I've raised that issue, and the use of public funds in the campaign for one candidate. But now the persons who would be petitioning were the beneficiaries of the largesse of government and government ministers. So that may not arise. So maybe those are the issues. Maybe campaign financing, maybe people raise all manner of issues. I don't know. I think we wait and see.
So in the last petition of 2017, among the issues was, of course, the transmission.
Yes.
And, you know, the questions that they were raising, NASA then, was how the result left the polling station and arrived at Bomas.
Yes.
And that's where the issue of, you know, the server, that there was, you know, infiltration of the server, there was an injection of some algorithm. This time, there's some top-level conversation about injection of algorithm.
Yes.
But not specific.
And you see why? You see the problem with 2017 is that the commission, the presiding officer and returning officers submitted alphanumeric the totals in alphanumeric form. And that is what the commission worked on as they were waiting for some of the forms. And they made a decision to announce the result before all the forms were there, you know. And so the challenge then was, how did you verify? What did you use to verify the result? Which is why this time they decided the only way to do so is to make sure that before you announce, all the forms are there. And you will have two ways of verifying. You'll have the electronic one, which is sent on that night, and then you'll have the physical one, which will be brought by the returning officer. And then the agents and the parties will have theirs. So once you have those three sources, then it is very possible, then you can say you have verified, if all those three agree. Now, if there is a dissension between the three, then you can then say there's a problem. And even then, if there is, what you work on is on the original 34A. If that 34A is there, it's available, that's the result you carry with whatever mistakes it has. But again, back to my point, I'm waiting to see, because there would be in social media, I'm waiting to see anybody saying that the form that was posted or that was used to tally the result was the wrong form 34A. Watch a 34B, and whether Kiambu's due there was 9,000. Those are neither here nor there for purposes of the election. The election is about 34A. The B series and the C series are easy to correct, and those can be corrected. So I don't see that is going to be an issue. The transmission route, in fact, one of the realities that my understanding of the law as it is this year is that there was actually no requirement for electronic transmission as a matter of law.
Really?
As a matter of law. And that is where you'll notice the results for MCAs, MPs, they were not transmitted electronically because there was no requirement. The commission elected to transmit the presidential ones, and I think it was a good decision. So what happened is that the law was amended in between, and then the provisions were declared unconstitutional, so we were left with a lacuna. My own view is that in the next amendment of elections, other than closing these gaps that we are now finding, I think one of the other things we will need to do is require electronic transmission of 34As, 35As, up to 37. I think it's up to 38. And the reason for that, Eric, and because I've participated in elections and I have been in the polling stations and counted. This year I visited about 16, 17 polling stations between the hours of 1 a.m. and 6 a.m. Is that at that hour, particularly because we start counting the presidential election, everyone is alert, everyone is awake, and nobody knows how the result will turn out.
Okay.
So everybody participates in signing that form. There's no agent who refuses to sign.
So the A's are signed. At that
A's
point,
are signed.
it's a fast ballot that you're counting.
It's the first ballot you're counting. And also, you don't know how the national result will be. So if you don't sign, it could prejudice your candidate. And at that point, you believe your candidate is winning. So you sign. Which is why if you check the forms that were submitted in the IBC portal, they're signed. Most of them. There are very few that are not signed by agents. So that is why that form is so important. And that is why for me in the future, MCA, MP, woman rep, county governor, senator, everything. The minute you count, they are signed by the agents, transmit, so that they are available for everybody to see. Let them be there in the part. It will even reduce the number of petitions. Because the petitions that we have actually arise on that, people saying, oh,
this is the wrong form.
This is the wrong form. The form was changed. By the time it got to the constitutional returning officer, it was amended or a new one was introduced. That is why my whatevers are not there. If it had been sent out that night, it's more difficult. So we'll actually reduce the volume of petitions if we were to do that.
Speaking of which, must all agents sign the form?
No, there's no requirement. The law has two provisions. It says agents can choose to sign. They can choose to refuse to sign. If they refuse to sign, they should indicate their reasons for not signing.
Okay.
But even if they don't, or they are not there, the law says the absence or the failure to sign does not invalidate the result. And the reason for that is that if you are to leave that role to the agents, the minute I see my candidate is losing, I refuse to sign. Then that result is not valid, Yes. So for that reason, they say, please sign. If you have a problem, don't refuse to sign. Sign.
But you have to give a reason.
But you give a reason. For example, when you go for a petition and you want a recount of the ballots, the right to recount is not automatic. Part of the reason why you'd be allowed to recount is if, for example, your agent raised issues which were not resolved by the presiding officer. Then you can say the issues we are raising in court now and demanding a recount, we actually demanded and it was refused. So in a sense, it's important that those reasons be recorded. It doesn't help you as an agent when you just refuse to sign. You don't help your candidate by refusing to sign. You help your candidate if you indicate the one, I was the only agent and I was being beaten when I try and raise issues. Just have it there.
So in this particular case of today, Chief Agent Saitaba Olekanchori says we have not seen Form 34C, which contains now the consolidation of the results. And we have not seen the commissioner. That's the returning officer. So basically what he's saying is we haven't been able to sign.
That would be unfortunate.
And we have not even been able to give a reason on the form on why we have not signed it.
Assuming it's true, that would be wrong. Because the returning officer must allow the agents to see the form, not necessarily to do anything with it. So that they can either sign, because they are signed by the agents, they can either sign or give their reasons for not signing. But you cannot withhold the form from the agents. That would be wrong. Assuming that's correct, it would be wrong. It is not. The law requires them to to confirm.
What recourse would such an agent have?
It would. Now, the problem would be, again saying, let's assume that you then find that they were denied. That in itself does not invalidate the result. Because the issue of the result is not about the agent's signature. It is whether the reason why, because the agent did not sign, the result is compromised. The reason why they are being denied a right to sign is because the result was being compromised. So the issue is not the signing. The issue is that the failure, the refusal to allow an agent to sign can point to an irregularity or a prejudice to the system. So that is what you'd be questioning. So the fact that you didn't sign or you are not allowed could be wrong, and maybe there are other sanctions, but it will not invalidate a result by itself. There has to be other things that show. Because at the end of the day, what are we doing for in an election? We are checking whether the will of the people, of the voter, is reflected in these returns. So that is the only question we are asking. So when you say, for example, that numbers were added or numbers were reduced, what you are saying is that addition or subtraction prejudiced the right of the voter.
Yeah.
So that is what. So it's not about the candidates or about the agents. It's about the voter and whether that result reflects their will. Yeah.
Finally, Kamalo, as we conclude the conversation this evening, we've been talking about electoral reforms for quite a while. After the 2017 nullification, there was all this talk of we are going to reform our electoral system.
Yes.
We haven't seen many changes or amendments to the law.
Yes.
Attempts by the IEBC to present amendments were just basically getting thwarted by the National Assembly. Even introducing regulations as required was being thwarted. The regulations on campaign financing were just basically thrown out.
Yeah.
So what do we need to actually see a proper, honest conversation on reforming our electoral system and then increases transparency and reduces the level of mistrust to the system?
Yeah. It's a journey. If you look at our electoral process between 2007, because that was probably our lowest moment, and 2022, we have come a very long way in terms of transparency and credibility of the election. We have come a very long way, So I think we shouldn't say that there has been significant reforms. There are certain areas, of course, where we haven't moved, like on campaign financing. And the problem with that is that you're actually asking the people most directly affected by that rule to make the decision. And so when you say you cannot spend X or that you're required to disclose where you get money, it is about them. So you're asking them to vote on that issue. That has a problem, but that is the nature of democracy. But the other thing is that while Parliament itself may not have been very progressive in electoral reforms, the courts have made very fundamental decisions about the electoral process. In fact, if you look at the structure of the election 2022, a lot of it is informed by the decisions of the Court of Appeal and the Supreme Court. So even though Parliament itself may not have done as much, the courts have. So we've made some we've gone some distance, but I think there are certain issues, like I said at some point, that are now becoming obvious. And I'm sure even in 2027 we'll have new ones, and then we'll keep reforming to address those issues. And a lot of those will not be done by Parliament; they'll be done by the courts.
And what do we need to do to reduce the level of mistrust in the system?
I think first is to ensure that the result is credible. That is the first thing we need to do. Why I say I am concerned about the events of today is because you cause suspicion on a process without indicating what is the substantive issue, which is not healthy, because you see, even you don't know, so what are you asking us to reform? So it's important that even as we critique this process, especially if we are the players, we need to critique it in a way that helps us to advance the journey. I think the more the election becomes credible, the more trust will be obtained. But also, don't forget that a lot of this also is contaminated by a nature of politics. For as long as politics becomes a winner-take-all, particularly at the top, and I think for me, one of the greatest failures of Jubilee is the failure to empower county governments. Because for as long as the whole country focuses on the presidency, because the presidency is very strong, it can deliver everything. The president can decide whether or not you're going to have bypasses and expressways, or whether you'll be walking on dirt roads, because the executive decides whether or not to send money to the counties. Even if money is allocated, they just say there's no money. But if the executive wants to spend money on anything, they can spend. The more we have continued to make the presidency powerful, the more the demand for it and the need to capture it has increased. And the reason then where there is mistrust is because we are looking at the one position, and usually it's a polarized position. It's a polarity. We have two people. So we divide the country into two. If we had reduced the power of the presidency and spread it to 47, that level of mistrust would have gone. It would dissipate. But for the more we continue to empower this office and everything falls or whatever on it, then you can be sure the mistrust will continue. Because for the people who are participating, they know if they lose, they will pay a price. Including, you see, one of the unfortunate is even the use of institutions. You know that I can decide who gets charged, who gets investigated, so the minute you make the institution of the presidency that powerful, then of course we'll fight for it, and of course then it will divide the country. So these issues are interrelated, and we need to recognize this and say, when we talked about an imperial presidency, have we been slowly recreating the imperial presidency? Why are we fighting so much for the presidency if we had weakened it? Because we have strengthened it at the expense of other institutions.
We really did not weaken it as we intended.
No, we did not.
Kamodo Waiganjo,
thank you.
Constitutional lawyer, former member of the Commission for the Implementation of the Constitution. Thank you very much for talking to us.
County. You know, Eric, you know there are places I've called Your Excellency.
Yes. First gentleman, Kirinyaga County. Now you'll be 7 of you.
Excellent. We will have our own wing in the First Spouses Forum.
And the Council of Governors.
Yes, and even the Council of Governors, you can't be represented.
But our views now start pushing to be members of IBEC and the other organs.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Keep it here for more. Jesse Rogers is here with greater updates from what's been happening around the country, plus talking to our correspondents. Jesse.
Well, thanks for that, Eric Latif. Interesting insights around the possibilities thereafter and the legal parameters once the official declaration was announced. We just want to get a feel of the mood across the country, even as that official result was